Hello and welcome to another one of our videos where we're going to be talking about ankles and specifically the best tips for trying to actually make it mobile and very stable and obviously enhance how you move. Alright, so let's get into it. Firstly, what do you need with the ankles? Do you need to strengthen them or do you need to make them more mobile? The answer, obviously, which I've got on the screen here, is mobile, and for the reason being, which I'm going to explain, what this big chart picture all means. Basically, like from the ground up, like when you place your foot to walk, the first thing that hits the ground is the soles of the feet, and they're going to feel their way, and they need to create stability. All right, so that if they're unstable, which most people have excessive pronation and their feet just flatten out, cause from many things, poor posture and crap footwear. We just a lot of factors, but which we'll go into in a minute. But this lack of stability at the foot then forces the ankle to try and correct things, and the ankle itself then becomes very stable and very stiff, when in fact it needs to have a lot of mobility because it's a joint that can move in a lot of different angles, no different to like the shoulder and the hip. So it becomes very, very stiff. Now, also sometimes the hip is the problem. The hip is from sitting too much, stiffens up. So the foot might be okay, but because of the hips too stiff, the knee, which in the middle of these two joints that are very mobile, it's stiff, actually is forced into becoming too mobile. That's why you see a lot of knee injuries caused from either tight hips or tight ankles. So it's a bit of like which is the chicken and which is the egg, but it's fair to say a lot of people are doing this, sitting too much. So it's, in most cases, I'm sort of finding it's this, and in many cases it's just the ankle, from an injury, from a sprain, that they just didn't rehabilitate correctly. High heel shoes, really stiffening it up all the time, and as you can see here, knee becomes unstable in an attempt to regain the lost mobility at that joint or at that joint. Overpronation at the ankle, so forcing the feet becoming unstable, so then the ankle becomes too stable, and you can see on and on and on. So which tight hips or weak glutes reinforce it. High risk of ACL injuries with the knee and patella tracking problems, walking compensation, on and on, and all the other different lower limb injuries you can think of: Achilles, plantar fasciitis, shin splints, all from over excessive pronation. All right, and above the hips, then you're getting into problems with back pain, piriform syndrome, all those other things that you see sort of from here up. All right, so again, it could be from here starting, or it could be from there starting, but it doesn't matter which one starts it. There's a chain reaction of up the chain or down the chain. That's why we call it the chain reaction matrix. All right, so when you understand this, you know that now that the ankle needs mobility. All right, and how does it get stiff? Well, as we mentioned, this is the mainstream medicine is all about treating symptoms. They don't really look for the cause, like we've just sort of saying then. So you might sprain the ankle, but it might have been the hip that forced you to sprain the ankle, or the feet. But people just treat the area in pain instead of the area where it's coming from. So taping the ankle is one of the worst things you can do for the ankle, because now you're just guaranteeing that it's going to stiffen up. It's already going to stiffen up from the scar tissue forming from the sprain, but now you're guaranteeing that. So this is the preventative measure, but it's actually going to create massive problems and very good chance of ruining your knee. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen with a knee, drastic, disastrous knee injury created from an ankle problem. So you really need to get this mobility back and teach it how to stabilize itself on a reflex level, not from artificial things to stiffen it, because stiffening is not stability. All right, so poor stability from movement. So we see this quite often from poor squats. So the terrible squat technique. And you can see here the angle at the ankle here is very minimal. So this is just reinforcing to stiffen this up and creating extra flexion through the back there. So there's a good chance of back problems from this, and creating muscle imbalances through the legs. In a single leg squat stance, you can see the ankle just doesn't have that angle again to get that range, so it creates a new method. And you can see this is where the ACL stuff sort of happens, patella tracking, ITB, friction, so on and so on. Alright, so poor movements with all these creates problems. Poor posture creates poor movements, or vice versa. Poor stability in the other joints, as we've spoken about, just creates that chain reaction of the body now having to stiffen things when it should be making them free and mobile. Ignorance to stretching is another one. Oops, sorry about that. Often the most neglected and misunderstood part of any exercise program. People just usually stretch what they like to do as opposed to what they need to do, and also a real lack of knowledge about how to use mobility drills. A simple test to use, we call the wall stretch, and basically you just kneel against the wall with your heel staying flat on the floor, and you just try to, and you can see how this is going to help with a squat form, right? Because you're trying to create this great angle at the ankle here, which then doesn't allows you to keep a more upright posture, so you don't end up trying to compensate by getting it all through the lower back in the end. You should be able to get 8 to 10 centimeters. You know, is around about the normal. If you're under 8, you know, you can safely say you've got a problem with that ankle. If you're above 10, then well, you're awesome, right? So you've got to do a lot of stuff. You probably don't have any problems anyway, but you make sure your foot directly points straight ahead, and the knee should move right over it. So quite often you'll see people trying to get to the wall, but they're again sort of twisting themselves around to do so. All right, so that's not a great method. All right, so it's a very simple test to do, and it gives you a bit of an idea of how flexible that ankle is. All right, now let's take a look at some of the great mobility drills we have. All right, here's Dylan showing us his specific squatting mobility drill for his ankle, and to get that knee sort of driving forward, that his heel coming off the floor. So basically all he's doing is he's holding his heel down on the ground and then using his other hand, his left hand, to drive his knee forward as much as he's pushing it forward. And then you can see now he's trying to take that knee outside the foot without the foot coming off the floor. This is where we see a lot of people with excessively flat feet and pronation. They just sort of cannot do that, and weak glutes become a problem. Tight groin muscles, adductors and hip flexors are just driving it. And you see here, this is where he really needs to get into in that deep squat position. So he's practicing more or less how to do that. So then he uses this before he does his squats to help him do his squats. All right, so it's again, he's trying to move it. He's not, just like when you move with a squat, you're moving, you're not sitting still. So he's trying to sort of like take it around in all angles. See that, how he drove it in, and he's driving it forward, and he's driving it out. All right, so a very simple drill, but very, very effective. All right, this is an interesting mobility device you can get from the internet. But if you don't have it, you can really create it anyway, just from using a rolled up towel or something to stand on, where you basically, and I'll play it for you. Nathan's just going to drive his foot back into real flexing, which they call Dorsi-flexion, and then he's going to plantar flex. So now he's moving it back and forth through his ankle, trying to keep his knee as straight as he can. And this is like trying to get that ankle to free itself up and become very mobile, because it must be a mobile joint. If it becomes stiff, then the knee becomes too mobile because the ankle's not providing it. Or what you do see quite often is people rolling in. This is the excessive pronation, and trying to correct the problem somewhere else up the chain. So quite often in the squat we find this is a big limitation. This is one reason why people can't get deeper, or if they go deeper, their heels come off the floor because they don't have the flexibility through that joint to do it. All right, so this is one drill you can use. It's very, very effective. Like I said, if you don't have this little tool, you can just use something to roll your foot across like a rolled towel. You go onto your toes, onto your heels, onto your toes, onto your heels. All right, here's one of Dylan's favourite mobility exercises, and he likes it because it sort of frees up several joints at once, which is the big difference between stretching and mobility, by the way. Stretching is usually just one joint, mobility is several of them at once, and usually it closely mimics a movement pattern. This one doesn't necessarily mimic a movement pattern, but does free up several of his joints at once, being his thoracic spine as much as his hip flexor and through his knee, even his ankles. So he's sort of getting a lot of things at once. So you'll see all he has to do is get in this sort of kneeling position, and then open himself up, so that his right leg is getting a real deep stretch and his thoracic spine is getting that mobility to move around. And if he wanted to, he could even move his knee forward on that left leg to create an ankle stretch. All right, but this is a great drill you can use to help you with that squat pattern, even lunges for that matter. A great one that you can use that does a lot, give you a big bang for your buck. All right, so I hope you got a bit out of those and give you some ideas on how you can sort of free that ankle up. Remember, difference of mobility is more, stretching is like one joint, mobility is like more than one joint. All right, so you're sort of moving more than one at a time. Now, once you've got it more mobile, you need to make sure you've got stability, because if you don't have enough stability there's a good chance you're just going to roll over. On a reflex level, it doesn't know how to stabilise itself, so there's a good chance if it can't stabilise itself, it's going to just resort back to becoming stiff again. So all the mobility drills are a waste of time, because the body's just going to just completely throw them in, all that stuff you've just done, in the bin, because it knows on a reflex level it can't stabilise itself. It doesn't know what to do. It has no ability. So you need to educate it, I suppose, and using exercises to enhance this ability to stabilise itself in a perfect position. All right. There's many different ways you can do this. Most of the single leg stuff is great. And then you should have a method of progressing to jumping and stuff like that. Now, one of the best ones that I've been using recently is the sensor mat. Really just a spiky mat. You could do, if you don't have this, you could just do it outside on some sticks and stones. But basically, because the little mechanoreceptors in your soles of your feet here have a massive impact on the balance and postural control, and the sequencing of the information from the nervous system to all of the other joints and muscles saying do this, do that, do this, do that, because they're the first things that hit the ground. So they're the first ones to know, okay, this is where I need you to go, this is where I need you to go. Because of the shoes we wear, we don't have this information coming into the system as much as we should, so our feet have become very lazy. All right, and as we mentioned at the beginning, if they become lazy, the ankle stiffens up as a result. All right, so doing exercises on this, and I can't tell you how effective this has been for people with nervous system problems, spinal cord injuries, multiple sclerosis. This has greatly enhanced their ability to walk, because remember, they've got a walking problem, let alone a stability, like a jumping or squatting problem. And these exercises using the sensor mat have been phenomenal. So don't have to be anything super hard. The single leg squat is probably the best one to use with this, and in addition to that, maybe the toe touch drill that I've got here. So we might use this toe touch drill standing on the sensor mat where he's going to move around in circles. Once we've got on top of those things, then we move into plyometrics and jumping and landing and stuff like that. One of the best drills that I've got for that, which I'll show you in a second, is an excellent one. All you need is a line, really. So I'll have a quick look at that, and that'll give you a good idea on what to do. And all he has to do is jump explosively sideways on a single leg, trying to stay within the lines and not hitting the middle line. Forwards and then backwards. The backwards is where you always see a lot more problems. This is where the braking mechanism comes into play a lot more. Great for injury prevention, right? So let's have a look at him do the other leg. So do the other leg and we'll get a comparison here. And usually the leg they pick first is the better leg. And because he's right-handed, you expect it to be his left leg. So a little bit slower timing on this right one. Still pretty good though. He's within the lines. A great exercise for developing glute strength, ankle strength, calf strength, everything you need. Change your direction. All right, so hope you enjoyed that. See you in the next one. So I hope you enjoyed that and you got some good ideas about, the things that you really need to do and incorporate into your training to, if you've got an ankle problem or even if you've got knee problems, these are all awesome exercises. And if you want more information, I highly suggest you go to our website, noregretspt.com.au. You can get out, if you've got a knee problem, it's the best one we've had. We've used this for many years now. If you don't have a knee problem, you're just looking to enhance your training and get some really good workouts. You'll get 100 different workouts here. give you, it's an awesome resource to help you with all the training stuff that you need. So I hope you've enjoyed that video, and I'll see you on our next one.